guys, welcome back to another Touchdesigner tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to be looking at taking a still image or a video or a video feed even, and turning it into a 3D point cloud like you can see here. Or actually what we're really doing is just instancing it into a grid and then displacing it into a 3D shape rather than creating an actual point cloud per se. A few things to mention. One, this project file is available for download on my Patreon. You can simply go and download and drag in your own images or your own video file and it should work straight away. Secondly, been receiving a lot of great feedback lately on my tutorials. There seems like there's two different audiences that are sort of coming to me. One, beginners that are looking to follow along these tutorials from scratch and build up and learn Touchdesigner, and then also a community of people that just see a cool visual and just want to recreate it or access the file. So when I'm doing these tutorials, the ones that are aimed at more beginners, I'm going to try rebuild these files from scratch, whereas the ones that are aimed at people more familiar with Touchdesigner, I might just talk through the process and provide you with the operators so that way you can note it down and recreate it. So what we're going to do in today's tutorial is we're actually going to try make this approachable for beginners, and so we're going to rebuild it from scratch. Now I'm going to keep the project file up here as reference, as obviously I don't have every single one of these nodes memorized, and then we're just going to go through and recreate it bit by bit. But yeah, as you can also see, if I plug in my video file and then change my threshold to greater, you can do live video feeds. Now this is without a Connect and simply just with a webcam, and I've seen a few really good tutorials on this as well. Ones that combine it with music and all that, but I found this one from a Korean content creator, and I thought it was a very approachable one for beginners, but sadly it's in Korean, so I've decided to take my own creative inspiration, rework some of the project file, and then try recreate it for you guys today. Cool, so let's start off. Let's start by disabling this little background we have here and importing our image or live video feed. To make sure this can be done by anyone, I'm just going to use a movie file in, and we're going to use the default little banana here. So essentially we're going to want to fit this banana to a grid and then offset the position of the banana on the grid in 3D space is essentially what we're going to do here. So the first thing we need to do is actually fit this to a grid of sorts, and I believe I've set this to whatever resolution you might like. So in the free version of Touchdesigner, the highest res you can do is 1280 by 1280, so we'll just do that, and then you can sort of pick your fit based on your image. For example, if you do fill outside, it will scale it up, but may actually crop some of it off. So I'm just going to keep that set to fit best for now. So the next optional step, which is something I added in, was I created this threshold. So this threshold, and then I did a combine. So I'm actually going to go back up here to explain why we're doing a threshold, because we don't need to do it for this banana because it has no background. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to be setting a mask for our input, so that way we don't just have like a solid blaring image with all this crazy background going on. And then we're going to apply this mask, combine it with the original image by multiplying the two values together, and that's going to give us this essentially soft outline like this, where we can more easily displace these values against the background. It's a bit of an optional step. It really depends on your background, but for this case I had an image with a very chaotic background or in my video feed, and I'm like, okay, I just want to highlight the plant, so this was a really good step for you to do if you want to do the plant. So very quickly, you want to set your threshold, pick less or greater, it'll depend on your image. then drag the threshold to a value that you're happy with that selects all of the foreground that you want. This might be easier to explain with a different image actually. Let me change that really quick. Let's do this plant. So here you can see that when I change this to greater, it works a bit better in this case. And maybe I don't like the white bars either side. That's because it's our fit. And if we actually set that to fill or to fit outside, we won't have that problem. And then it's just simply a case of being like, okay, I don't want that much background. Maybe I want it around there. And if I soften it a little bit to bring a bit more of that foreground in, and then drag it into our comp like so. And if the value is set to multiply, we will get a lot of the flower coming through. Now again, feel free to play with this value. Maybe you want that and you do want the surrounding greenness, or we can actually find a value. Maybe you want to do less and instead do it this way. It's really up to you. Since that's a optional step, I'm just going to reset everything to what it was, so fit best, and then change this back to the banana, as we don't really need that. What we do need is a resolution. So we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting the resolution of the grid here by going to common and going custom resolution. You can see up here what I've done is I've pressed tab and gone to the chops and gone to a constant chop. So constant, we can just type in a number and then use this value to set different variables across the project. And then when we update this value, it will change it for everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in resolution. So you can name this anything you want and then set it to 300. Basically, what this is going to do is give us a 300 by 300 grid of pixels. Depending on your computer, you might want to do a higher or lower value. I think 300 is a safe bet where it's not too many pixels, but I accidentally typed in 3000 before and it destroyed my machine, so be careful. And then from there, we want to click on our resolution and we can toggle viewer active on the constant and drag and drop that onto the weird resolution and reference it, which will do it for both the X and the Y, or horizontal and the height. Cool. So the next thing is we're going to split off into multiple paths. So one is we're going to be doing the position data, and then one we're doing the color. So for the color, we want to connect this to a level. We're going to come back to this level later on once we have actually instanced the geometry, because you might want to change the color. So what we're going to do for now is go into a null, and then you can name this color if you want, so you can remember what we're doing with each of these. The next thing we want to do is convert this to a chop by right-clicking the output and going to chop and then top 2. So what we have now is our image value represented in data format with RGB for red, green, and blue values. We also have A for alpha, which is essentially how transparent the object is. So you can see like around this section, it's not transparent at all, and then the rest of it is completely transparent because that's what our image is. Don't actually need this alpha, so we're going to go ahead and drop that. And we're going to come back to these values later. Actually, no, we should I'm just checking what I've done up here. Why have I got all of these values? Yep. So, sorry, like I said, this is something I've just learned about myself. So rather in the crop tab here, we have crop set to row. We want to change that to full image instead, so we actually get all of the full image data. And then we want to connect this to a shuffle, and then sequence the channels by names, which is then going to give us a better RGB spread of our values. And that's pretty much it for our color to chop. So going back to our resolution, I'm just going to separate that. We want to create a noise top. And then let's plug in our banana to both the top and bottom one. So this noise is actually going to serve as the offset on the Z-axis. So by that, when I show you this video again, see how this is pulsing back and forth and pulsing back and forth. This noise is going to be what controls and sets the parameters for that. So what we want to do from here is set the null like so. We'll come back later on and animate this noise, but for now we can leave this as is. And then we essentially just want to do what we did here, and you can either repeat this or you can copy and paste like that and drag this new null on like so. Double checking that is everything. Yes, yes, yes. Cool. So what we need to do is we're going to essentially combine the output of one of the like RGB values, so, and then combine that with the Z axis of a 2D plane. It's kind of hard to explain, but I promise this will make sense. So if we do a select chop, and then where it says star for channel names, if we just change this to R, we then want to connect it to a math, which we'll come back to later. This will we'll turn this down essentially to combine the operations, and then set this to a null. And then I'm going to also connect this one to a null just up top and drag it so it's in line with these. Cool. So again, to go over what we've done, we have a channel here which is grabbing the colors and turning it into chop values. Then we've combined the image with some noise and then converted that to chop values, and we're just grabbing one of the noise values which is going to be changing, and we're going to use that to define where the Z axes should be. So as this noise pulsates back and forth, so will the position of the image. So what we need to do is get the X and Y axes, which is just going to be a flat 2D surface that we displace in midair. So if we go to our SOP tab and grab a grid, and then connect this grid to a null, doing this just in line with these, and in fact we can probably rename this one to displace, which might mess up this, so I might need to re-drag that on, and then I'm going to change this to grid. Now we want to make sure this grid is set to the same resolution that we've defined up here, so we can click plus on that again and drag that onto the rows as well as the columns, so we have a 300 by 300 grid. Now when we change this value to 200, all the values here will change to a 200 size grid. We'll keep it at 300, but just show you how you can now change this value to change all of the information. So next we want to do is convert this to a chop, just like these other ones. Now we're, like I said, not going to need the Z axes. As you can see when we look at this in 3D space, it's got nothing on the Z axes. That's because we're going to get that information from the displacement up here. But we do need the X and the Y. So if we connect this to a select, and then under channel names, we type in TX space TY, just to grab our TX and then TY. And then let's go ahead and connect this to a null for good measure. And then we want to combine all these three together. So our color, Z output, and X and Y. Before we do that, you'll notice that the X and Y is named TX and TY. So for our middle channel, we actually are selecting the R values, but we want to rename this from R to TZ. So that way it recognizes it as a translate Z axes. Now, if we go ahead and get a merge operator, chop, and combine the first one, the second one, and the third one. The order of which you do this shouldn't matter. And then you'll see that we have, can I see it when I zoom in? I'm not sure. It's somewhere in here. It's supposed to say like RGB and then TXTZ TY, but we at least have the TY value here, which is awesome and pretty much all we need to start by doing the geometry. So for the geometry, we're going to be doing a thing called instancing. Basically, instancing is creating a piece of geometry for each bit of data we pass in. So we need to first define what that geometry is going to be. Up top, I used a box, which is just a flat 2D plane. You can do a 3D object if you want, but it will make it more computationally intense. I've then connected it to a transform, and essentially we just want to scale down this transform to a really small number. So I'm going to do 0.003. I'm just going to make sure there was no offset. No, cool. So then we want to connect this to a geometry comp. So right now it's just a tiny little box by itself. I'm going to run into a few errors here with multiple rendering going on. This won't affect you, so don't worry about this. We want to also add in a camera and a light. Then we want to do a render top, and yours will automatically pull from these three here. Since I have multiple renders going on, I'm going to go ahead and manually define them, but you don't need to actually do this. Might as well add a material as well. So if we go to our materials tab and then grab PBR, it's a type of material, or even actually, let's just use a fawn this time around, a little bit more of a basic one, and drag and drop that onto material. Cool. Now from our render, we're just going to go ahead and select a null and set that to be displayed as background by pressing this blue button. Alright, well, so far so good. So now we actually need to instance this data onto the geometry. So the way we do that is we go to our instance tab and turn instancing to on. This is something I did like a million times over when I was first learning Touchdesigner, but never really fully understood. So when we're instancing a chop, we want to set our default instance op to all the values that we've defined here. So we drag and drop that onto default like that. From here, we have multiple things like the translate, rotation, and then we even on Instant 2 tab have our color options, as well as some texturing and all that sort of thing. The information that we're providing today is, again, the RGB values of the image, the Z displacement that is defined by the shape of the banana we've passed in, as well as some noise that we've overlaid. Again, it's not animated at the moment, but we'll get back to that. And then a 2D plane grid, like you can see here. So we need to set our geometry, we need to set our translate X to be TX, which you can click on this one and grab TX, translate Y to TY, and then I've also think I have an, I've made a mistake actually. If we go back to our select tab here, we need to change this rename from star. I meant to type TZ into rename to, not rename from. You might have caught that already, but I missed that. And then finally our translate Z set to TZ. And then boom, we have a 3D banana. As you can see, when I zoom right in, you can see we have our 2D grid here, as well as our 3D our banana value that is being displaced on the Z axis, and you can even see the little trailing off pieces here, which is actually defined, which is actually our noise combined with the banana. So it's looking pretty good. A few things is, one, we should set our rendering to be 1280 by 1280, like so. we might want to make this geometry closer, so we can go into our camera and either hold down middle mouse and zoom in, or you can actually just use the translate options here, but I'm just going to zoom in like so and be like, you know what, that's pretty good. Next, we want to make the background black. We can do that by, there's multiple ways of doing that. One is to insert an RGB key like so, and then we're pretty much good. All we need to do now is add in a bit of color. Now, if we go to our geometry tab, go to our instancing number 2, when we click under color, you can see it's got all the information we passed in here, and we just need to set this to R, and then type in G, and then B. And then finally, we have our 3D banana. And again, if we go into our camera and we actually rotate this, you can see it is completely 3D. So let's add a bit of animation before we also do some styling. I'm also just positioning that somewhere I like. So we go back to our noise over here, and then we go to our transform, and then our translate Z, which is our third one along here. And we type in ABS capital T time dot seconds. We'll see if we get a bit of 3D animation going on like so. Maybe that's a bit fast for you. You might want to multiply that by, say, 0.5. Slow it down a little bit. You can slow it down even more if you want. And then under the noise, I'm going to make the period a larger number, like 3. So it just does like bigger waves. And then drag everything else down to 0. So we can really see those sort of waves coming through. Maybe even make the exponent go down a little bit. Same with the amplitude. And then I also want to drag my offset all the way down to 0. Maybe that's a bit too much momentum for you, so you can keep dragging the amplitude down even more. Same with the exponent, although we can have the exponent up a little bit. This is really just up to your preference here, bit of fine tuning. You can even turn off the noise if you want. But yeah, if I just look at the settings that I had above, so I actually had the period set to 2 rather than 3. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with that sort of movement. It's not perfect, but I'm not trying to make something perfect here. So I mentioned earlier we had this math, and this like back and forth range is quite high. So the reason we had this range is we want to turn this range from 0 to 1 to something a bit smaller, so 0 to say 0.3. Essentially now if we look at our geometry and then rotate it, it's made the scale of the banana's offset nowhere near as drastic, just like a little bit closer to the actual background. So now we might want to readjust the camera given that, like so. And then we have a bit of a cool looking 3D banana going on. From here, it's a little bit just post-processing, you know? We can go into our palette tabs, maybe go to image filters, get some bloom, drag, drop, combine it like that. Maybe we set this to 16-bit so it's a bit easier to control. This is all just styling options. I'm even looking at it now and being like, hey, this is like starting to look like a bit of a TV. So maybe you want to lean into the TV. If we grab a pixelate, an RGB delay. This is just optional styling. From this point forward, this is actually pretty much just the entire tutorial done. I'm honestly just going to thank you guys for watching if you did make it through this far. As you can see, it's pretty much just a one-to-one recreation of what I did above. Please let me know any feedback you might have. It helps me to improve as a content creator. Not something I'm striving to be, more so I just want to make the software more accessible to everyone. Talking to my friends about this is what drove me to actually create these tutorials, so I'm still pretty bad at all, but I hope I'm creating something of value to some people out there. If you can support me on Patreon, that is greatly appreciated, but otherwise thank you for watching. I'm going to keep pushing on and adding in these cool little effects, just seeing what this turns into. If it intrigues you, feel free to keep watching. So I reckon some pixelate, RGB delay and noise will give us a really cool TV look. So I'm going to drag that into the first input and then set the output to just noise. So we get our scale, drag the period right down like that. And then on translate, type in that abs.time.seconds that we had earlier. I made a typo, need a capital T, getting a nice little bit of noise going on there. Let's do a composite. Let's also do a level before the composite and go to the post, drag the opacity right down. And then let's drag the bloom into the composite as well, and then that to there, and then let's set this to screen. Yeah, a bit too bright even still, but we're getting some nice noise. I feel like these TVs also have sometimes like a RGB sort of noise going on there. I might even do a level after the noise so I can readjust the black level and keep a lot of that noise going on like that. Could even like turn the period of it up to make it a little bit more noticeable, but that's all good. Keep the order of that. Let's add in a RGB delay. This will kind of give us that chromatic abbreviation sort of effect. Whoa, that's trippy. Why are we getting that? Because it's being plugged into the noise. Don't want that. Oh, we don't actually want anything being plugged into that second bit of the noise. So that RGB delay is quite intense there. Just a very subtle one will help give a more burnt in kind of look. And then yeah, if we're going for a TV, we gotta have a bit of pixelation. Probably not that much, but a little bit like that. And now we have our 3D pixelated banana. If creating interesting effects like that in Touchdesigner is of interest to you, let me know and I'd be happy to break that down. But that's pretty much it for today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. This entire project file will be available for download in the description below. But other than that, talk to you later.